Her tray trembled in her hands as the words echoed across the glittering ballroom. "Bring her to me!" Every head turned. The billionaire CEO, Richard Whitmore, sat at the center table, his sharp eyes fixed on her. Maya froze, her waitress uniform standing out like a scar against the diamonds and silk gowns that filled the gala. She had no idea why she was being singled out, but the moment was about to change her life forever. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more life-changing stories. Maya Johnson was used to being invisible. She worked double shifts as a waitress just to keep the lights on in her tiny apartment. While others in the city walked past her without a glance, she carried herself with quiet dignity, never letting the world see how hard she was struggling inside. When she was hired to serve at the prestigious Whitmore Foundation Gala, she thought it was just another long night of balancing trays and fake smiles. She had no idea she was walking straight into a storm that would expose the arrogance of the powerful and reveal a secret buried deep in her past. Richard Whitmore wasn't just any billionaire. He was the billionaire. Ruthless in business, feared in politics, and adored by elites, he moved through the world untouchable. To him, people like Maya were nothing more than shadows in the background, servants meant to stay silent. At the gala, he basked in his power. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, and every word he spoke was treated like gospel. But behind the polished smile, Richard carried a bitterness that made him lash out at anyone beneath him. It happened so quickly. As Maya passed through the tables, a guest bumped into her and a glass nearly slipped from her tray. She steadied it gracefully, but Richard noticed. His cold eyes narrowed. "Bring her to me," he said. The room fell silent. Guests shifted uncomfortably, unsure what game he was playing. Maya's manager whispered urgently, "Go, Maya, don't make him wait." With her heart pounding, she stepped forward, every eye burning into her. Richard leaned back in his chair, sipping his wine, his voice dripping with mockery. "You're the one they call what? Maya? A waitress who can barely carry a tray? Tell me, do you even know where you are? This is not your world." Maya clenched her fists, but she refused to lower her gaze. The crowd chuckled nervously, feeding on her discomfort. What Richard didn't know, what no one in that glittering ballroom knew, was that Maya carried a truth powerful enough to shatter his empire. For years, Richard had erased his past, burying anyone who could expose the lies he built his empire on. But fate had other plans. The invisible waitress standing before him was no stranger, and the locket she carried in her pocket held the proof that could bring him to his knees. The crowd waited for Maya to break under Richard's humiliation. But instead, she lifted her chin, her voice steady. "Mr. Whitmore, maybe I don't belong in your world, but you're about to find out I belong in this story more than you ever imagined." Gasps filled the room. Richard's smirk faded, and in that moment, the balance of power began to shift. The room went still as Maya reached into her pocket. Richard's mocking smirk faltered when he saw the glint of silver dangling from her trembling fingers. A locket. And not just any locket, one he thought had been buried with his past, never to be seen again. Gasps filled the ballroom. Richard's hand gripped the edge of the table, his voice low and sharp. "Where did you get that?" Before we continue, don't forget, if this moment shocked you, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more powerful stories. For years, Richard Whitmore believed he was untouchable. Billionaire, CEO, king of the city's elite. He built an empire on ruthless ambition, burying mistakes and discarding people like they were nothing. But now, standing before him, was a young black waitress he tried to humiliate, holding the one thing that could unravel his carefully constructed kingdom, the silver locket. Maya's voice trembled at first, but her courage grew with every word. "This locket, it belonged to my mother. She always told me it was given to her by someone who abandoned her when she needed him most, someone who thought his name and money would erase the past.
She snapped the locket open. Inside, a faded photograph stared back. A much younger Richard Whitmore, arm wrapped around a woman who looked exactly like Maya. The crowd gasped again. Richard's face went pale. For the first time that night, he was the one who looked small. Richard leaned forward, his voice low, almost desperate. "You don't know what you're saying. Put that away now." But Maya didn't flinch. "No, not tonight. You wanted me brought here. You wanted everyone to see me. Well, here I am, the daughter you tried to erase." The silence was deafening. Reporters scrambled for their cameras. Guests whispered furiously, scandal brewing in the air. Richard's empire, his legacy, was teetering on the edge, and the waitress he tried to humiliate had just pushed it there. The irony was almost poetic. A man who prided himself on power and control, undone by the very person he thought unworthy of standing in his presence. The billionaire who humiliated a waitress in front of hundreds was now the one being humiliated before the world. And Maya? She wasn't just standing tall. She was glowing with the dignity of every underdog who had ever been told they didn't belong. Richard rose to his feet, his voice trembling with fury. "You don't know what you've just done." But Maya's steady gaze met his. "Oh, I do, and this is just the beginning." The ballroom erupted in chaos, reporters shouting, guests rushing out, Richard's advisors scrambling to contain the disaster. But one truth was clear. The story of the billionaire and the waitress would never be hidden again.
By sunrise, the video had already hit 10 million views. Every channel, every platform. Billionaire CEO's hidden daughter exposes him at charity gala. The same man who had controlled headlines for decades was now being destroyed by them. No one could look away. Clips of Maya's confrontation filled every feed, her calm voice, the locket, Richard's stunned face. It wasn't just a scandal, it was symbolic. A waitress who stood up to power, a daughter who confronted abandonment, and a moment that peeled back the mask of privilege. Comments poured in by the thousands. "That woman's courage gave me chills. How many others has he hurt and silenced? She didn't just stand for herself, she stood for all of us." For the first time in decades, the public wasn't afraid of Richard Whitmore. They pitied him. Inside Whitmore Holdings, panic spread like wildfire. Board members called emergency meetings. Investors withdrew millions overnight. Every network wanted Maya's story. Every journalist wanted a quote. And Richard? He was silent, hidden behind closed doors, watching his empire crumble. His lawyer's voice trembled as he spoke. "Sir, the board wants answers. They're calling it ethical misconduct. This could cost you everything." Richard clenched his fists, staring at his reflection in the darkened window. Everything he'd built, power, money, reputation, slipping through his fingers because of a woman he had once dismissed as just a waitress. Meanwhile, Maya's life was changing faster than she could comprehend. She still worked at the diner, still served tables, but now people recognized her. Strangers walked up with tears in their eyes, thanking her for standing up to a system that treated them as invisible. One night, as she wiped down the counter, her manager approached with a trembling smile. "Maya, there's someone here to see you." She turned. A man in a tailored suit stepped forward, carrying a small envelope. "Miss Lewis," he said, handing it to her, "the Whitmore Foundation Board has requested your presence tomorrow morning. They want to discuss a correction." That night, Maya couldn't sleep. What did they mean by correction? Were they offering hush money, an apology, or something more sinister? But when she walked into the glass tower the next morning, she found the entire board already waiting, and Richard sitting quietly at the end of the table, his once commanding posture now slumped, defeated. "Maya," said the chairman softly, "on behalf of Whitmore Holdings, we wish to apologize for the treatment you endured, and for the past
that was hidden from you. He turned to Richard. Mr. Whitmore has something to say. Richard rose slowly, his voice hoarse. I built this company thinking strength came from control. But I see now it comes from truth. Maya, I was wrong. The room fell silent. Maya's eyes glistened, but she said nothing. Then the chairman spoke again. We'd like to offer you something symbolic. A position as head of our new Community Development Initiative. The same communities this company once ignored will now be led by the one person brave enough to hold us accountable. Maya gasped softly. The underdog had just been offered a seat at the table that once rejected her. As she stepped outside into the morning light, camera flashes surrounded her once again. But this time, the crowd wasn't mocking her. They were cheering. Then, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. This isn't over, Maya. You think you won? You just opened a door you don't understand. W. She froze. Was Richard warning her or threatening her?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this unexpected press conference. The world's media gathered inside the marble lobby of Whitmore Holdings, cameras flashing, reporters shouting. In front of them, Maya stood at the podium, while somewhere in the back, Richard Whitmore watched in silence, his empire now in her hands. No one in the room could have guessed what would happen next. Within days of Maya's appointment, everything changed. The story had shifted from scandal to transformation. Headlines read, Waitress turned executive inspires corporate reform. Whitmore Holdings commits $100 million to community development. From betrayal to breakthrough, Maya Lewis redefines power. The once feared company had become a beacon of change, and the woman they once silenced now stood at its center. But not everyone celebrated. Behind closed doors, whispers grew louder. Investors murmured about too much publicity, too much moral reform. And at the center of it all, Richard. He had resigned from the board, but he wasn't finished. Not yet. Late one evening, the board members received anonymous invitations to an urgent private summit. When they arrived, the meeting room lights dimmed, and Richard appeared on the giant screen. Sharp suit, calm expression, every bit the old CEO again. Good evening, he began. You may have forgotten who built this company, but I haven't. He clicked a button. Charts and graphs appeared, projections of profit loss since Maya's appointment. I created this empire from nothing. I will not watch it crumble in the hands of a waitress who doesn't understand business. The board exchanged nervous glances. He continued, Tomorrow morning, I will issue an industry-wide announcement. I'm founding a new conglomerate, Whitmore Global, and anyone who believes in real leadership will follow me. By sunrise, Richard's words shook the financial world. A man once disgraced was making a comeback. Televisions blared. Former CEO launches new company, declares redemption through power. Maya watched from her office, her heart pounding. He wasn't apologizing, he was rewriting the story. Moments later, her assistant rushed in. Maya, the press is requesting a response. What should we say? Maya stood slowly, gazing out at the skyline. Her reflection in the glass reminded her of her mother, strong, patient, unbreakable. She turned to the camera crew gathering outside her door. We won't fight him, she said calmly. We'll show him what leadership really means. Hours later, Maya stepped onto a grand stage set for the International Business Ethics Forum. Every major CEO, investor, and journalist in the world watched live. Richard had just finished speaking, his words sharp and defiant. When Maya approached the microphone, the room fell silent. She began softly. I grew up watching men like Richard Whitmore decide who deserved a voice. But today, I stand here to remind the world integrity isn't weakness. Compassion isn't incompetence.
and humility is not defeat. The audience murmured. Cameras zoomed in. She held up the silver locket, the same one from the gala. My mother used to say, "Don't fight darkness with anger. Shine brighter instead." That's what we're doing at Whitmore Holdings. We're not chasing profit. We're building people. The crowd erupted in applause. Even some of Richard's former allies stood to clap. And as the camera cut to Richard, he sat motionless, his jaw tight, his eyes glistening. For the first time, he looked small. Later that night, as Maya left the event, her phone buzzed again. It was an email. Subject: Private document, Whitmore Global. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a scanned birth certificate. The name, Maya Whitmore. Father, Richard Whitmore. Her breath caught. She whispered, "No, no, this can't be right." The screen flickered, then another message appeared. "It's time you know the whole truth. R.W." The file attached, Project Echo. She opened it and froze. Dozens of photos appeared, including one of her mother standing beside Richard, smiling, holding a newborn baby, the same locket around her neck. Sometimes justice brings peace, but sometimes it opens wounds we never knew existed. Truth may free us, but it can also haunt those who seek it. The story fades out on Maya's trembling face, illuminated by the glow of the laptop screen. As the words appear on screen,